year here, ninth year here at Foundation. So I've been visited schools. I mean pre-COVID, visited over like I think over 100 boarding schools in the US, UK, and in Switzerland as well. And I personally graduated from a boarding school in Australia. So if you have any questions about like boarding schools or like application or like life in a boarding school, just feel free to ask me. You can drop a question in the chat box. I'm happy to answer all of your questions towards the end of our webinar today. So today I just want to share with you. I know some families here today, they actually participated in our Singapore Fair back in October 2022. So yes, so some of them may be, some of you guys may already be familiarized with like the application process and all that. But today I just want to share a little bit more of like, I got a lot of questions from parents like, why do I need to send my kids to like a boarding school? Why not like a day school or like just stay in whatever school that the students are currently studying in? So before I start, like why do we send students to boarding school? I just want to have like a quick moment to share about like the common entry points for US boarding schools. So as highlighted here in green, the most common entry points for American schools will be 7th grade and 9th grade. And most of the senior boarding schools in America, they usually start from 9th grade with a couple of schools with an exception. They start in 8th grade, for example, like Groton is a school that offers 8th grade, but their 8th grade cohort is relatively small. Yeah, so that's why like why we highlight like 9th grade as a common entry point is that that's the major the main year that they take a lot of students. 10th grade possible as well, but it really depends on schools. Some of the schools, they don't really open for international students application because they just don't have the space. It really depends on the schools because they will really have to see like, after 9th grade, how many students are going to stay. And because some of the school, they really want to keep their student population small. So they don't intend to grow their population, the student population in 10th grade or 11th grade. So that's why what we usually recommend families to apply for, it's actually 9th grade for senior boarding schools. 11th grade and 12th grade, not basically, I would say there's like very, very, very slim chance of like they have an opening. But again, case by case. 11th grade, I have done some applications before, but it really depends on the situation. But the most common entry point would definitely be 9th grade, with a few exceptions for like 10th grade as well. And for 7th grade, this is for junior boarding schools. So for junior boarding schools, we would say they're like considered as middle school. So a lot of the senior boarding schools, they start boarding, they start accepting students as a boarder when they're in 7th grade, with exceptions as well. Some started in 6th grade and some started in 5th grade. But overall, based on our experience, we do feel that 7th grade is the best time for students to go attend a junior boarding school. It's mostly because for junior boarding schools, the last year, like the graduating year, will be 9th grade. There aren't a lot of schools in the US that offer like from 7th grade to 12th. There are, but not a lot. So that's why a lot of the students, when they attended a junior boarding school, they will have to apply out again when they're in 9th grade to senior boarding schools, either as a repeat 9th grader or like a rising 10th grader. And why would I say 7th grade is like the major main entry point for for junior boarding school is that usually we recommend students to have like at least around like 1 to 2 years in a junior boarding school environment, because first year is usually for them to settle in like the cultural difference or like the language barrier and all that. And 8th grade is really the year for them to join a lot of different activities, take on different leadership roles and stuff. And then for 9th grade is the application year. So 7th grade, it's like it gives you the best like time for the students to adapt well into the environment and prepare themselves to apply for senior boarding schools. So yeah, so 7th grade and 9th grade definitely are the most common entry points for junior boarding schools and senior boarding schools. Next question. So yeah, so this actually a lot of the parents would ask like, why do I send my kids to like a boarding school but not like a homestay school or like a day school? So I would say first, it really depends on the family. I would say there's like no best option. It really depends on the student, obviously, and also the family expectation as well. So traditionally for day school, they do focus a little bit more on the academic side, but for boarding schools, they focus more on the character building of like the students, because you have to live in the dorm. Obviously, you'll be, I assume everyone will be applying to boarder, not like a day student applying to like a boarding school. So they do have like, they really want students to be well-rounded. It doesn't mean that you have to be like a, wow, like a talented athlete or like talented musician, but they just really want students to engage in a whole lot of different activities and the community that they are in, because the community, like the students in the dorm or in the school, in a boarding school, they're from like they're from all around the world. So it's really good for, I would say, networking purposes. And also it's a really good time for students to step out of their comfort zone to talk to people that are from like different parts of the world, which day school, usually the students, they are mainly from like even for local areas, or they might be of a certain nationality. So this is, I would say, this is a major difference between the boarding school and a day school. And I can share a little bit more later afterwards. For boarding school, they do have a really strict schedule, because, you know, for day school, the day kind of ends at like 3:30, and after that, students can just go home. But for boarding school, it's mandatory, even for day students, they have to take on some sort of sports or some sort of like activities at school. Let's say theater or like community service is mandatory, basically. And obviously, when you are a boarder, so they will have a really like structured schedule. They will have like, oh, what time you have to like have dinner, and then during study hall is like usually from 7:30 to 9 is like a time for all the students to do their homework. And then they do have like a really strict lights out policy as well, especially for lower grade students. And sometimes they do cut off their Wi-Fi as well. So it's really structured for all the boarding schools. But for homestay schools, sometimes like some of the families, they will share, oh, I will have more flexibility to take my kid out for more activities. Yes, but but at night you will have to either the guardian or like the homestay parents, they will have to like make sure the students doing their homework. Unlike the students that are in the boarding school already, the teachers will be there, and there will be like older students to monitor the younger students during study hall time as well. So again, so there's no like best option. It really depends on the family expectation. How do you want your kid to grow up to be, and also what kind of environment that you want your kid to be in. And then this is just like a brief comparison. We just take some sample. So Philip Exeter Academy, I would say, is like an elite boarding school in America. And we did that this comparison with like different different international schools across Asia. So Singapore American School, International School of Beijing, Shanghai American School, and HKIS. So as you can see, a lot of the parents was like, oh, I can just, the school that I'm currently studying in is already in like the American system. Why would I really have to send my kid to like a boarding school in the US, right? But usually a lot of the parents like, oh, I really want my kid to get into a good college. So from this like matriculation, I always said like the statistics speaks it all. So basically, as you can see, like Philip Exeter, like a top boarding school in America, they do have like a really steady number of students getting into like Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Cornell, like all the Ivy League schools every single year. So unlike the other schools, I mean, the other schools, I would say the international schools are catching up, but usually the US colleges, they're more familiarized with the schools in the US. And obviously there are these boarding schools that are called the US, like the college prep schools. So what the curriculum or like the activities, what they are designed for the students will make them have like a kind of like a good resume and prepare them for college. So this is why a lot of the parents, they would consider thinking about like sending their kids to like a boarding school first before getting into a US college, because it's actually quite challenging applying from like Asia to like a top US college when compared to like a student who have already been studying in a US boarding school. It doesn't mean to have like, it doesn't necessarily to be in like a top boarding school. So for example, a couple of my students, they are they studied in like a top, let's say 50, 60-ish, like in terms of ranking wise, boarding schools. But they did really, really well there, because for boarding school, as I mentioned before, they really focus on the character building, and they give you all sorts of different resources. Like the teachers will be there after school, and the students are encouraged to try out things that they want. So actually a lot of them, they went into like Stanford or even the Ivy League schools, even though they didn't attend a top boarding schools in the States. So this is an opportunity for students, because here at Foundation, what we really want is finding the best fit for the student. So there's like no best, like a rank number one doesn't mean that is a good fit for all of the kids, because we believe that every student is different and they're unique in their own ways. Like they have different interests and their strengths are different as well. It's really important for us, the consultants, to give like the best advice to all our families in terms of like all the planning, or like what schools will be a best fit for the students. And these are, I mean, there are a whole lot of different advantages of attending a boarding school, but we just listed out like the most like common ones here. So again, the first one I would say like prepare students for admission to top universities, as we saw from the previous slides from the statistics. And also I would say what I really like about boarding schools is like the strong teaching teams, or like the number of years that the teachers spend teaching in a boarding school. Like usually they, like a lot of the teachers, they just spend over 20 years, some like even 40 years studying in the same, teaching in the same boarding school, when compared to like international schools, because most of them might be expats. So they might just like stay for like a couple of years, then they might like move on to other schools or to other countries. But for boarding schools, a lot of the teachers are actually graduate from the school, or they really like the school, they live on campus. So that's why so the teachers actually know the school, know the teachers, and know the students very, very well. So in terms of like the stability of the teaching team, this is something that I would say family values the most. Not like changing teachers, and the teachers actually know the students inside out. And also I would also want to highlight the all-rounded like curriculum studies. A lot of the US boarding schools, they do focus on like the Harkness discussion method, which is like this discussion style. Basically, it's not like, oh, all of the grades are based on exams and tests. Some of the schools, they actually, your grades will be based on how like the students participate in class discussion. So it actually help the students to improve their presentation skills and also their critical thinking ability, right? So, and also some of the schools, they really encourage, some of the courses are designed to, they call it the interdisciplinary courses. So for example, English might be mixed with history. They share the same topics, but they learn, like, obviously they learn the elements in English and then the elements in history. So this is something that I think is very interesting, and especially for teenagers. I know like some of them, they might not be very, very interested in studying all like math or like English, science, and all that. But the boarding school, they do offer like a great variety of courses. Most of them, they offer like over 200 courses that you can choose from, like some core subjects and some elective courses that you can pick from too. And some they offered interdisciplinary courses that kind of combine, let's say photography and science together. So this is something that I saw. And also I saw there's a course combining like marine biology and English writing together. So this is something that the boarding schools really want students to have like an open mind and train them up to have like different skill set for the future as well. And the last thing, it's about the close-knit community. So as I mentioned before, all the students, not all, but most of the students, they'll be living on campus. So even in college, I know like we said, oh, we live in the dorm and all that, but you won't be living with your peers. But in the boarding school, they some of them, they do have like dorm activities, for example, like weekend activities that create a really strong bond within the dorm, and also establish really good friendships as well. So this is something is a really good experience for the students, not only for academics, not just purely focusing on academics, but also focusing on like their interpersonal skills and how they're going to make friends and how they're going to adapt to a new environment. And I just want to quickly show some pictures. So this is Lawrenceville School, which is in New Jersey. So this is like, they do have like their indoor track. A lot of the schools, they do have like their own gym, and they have like, some of them, they do have like indoor swimming pools, and they do offer like Stevenson School, which is another school in the West Coast. They do have like their own golf course on campus as well. Some of the schools on the East Coast, they do have their own golf course on campus, such as Hotchkiss, Blair. They do have their own golf courses on campus, and students can actually do participate in golf competitions and as a varsity sport as well. Next thing, equestrian. Some of the schools, there are like a really good equestrian schools, such as like Dana Hall or like Loomis in Connecticut. They do offer horse riding training, and they allow students to do it as a varsity sport as well. And then ice hockey. So this is more common on the East Coast, I would say. So a lot of the students, they do offer, they will try out for ice hockey. And in boarding schools, they really encourage students to participate in different sports. You don't have to be good at it, or some of my students, they never tried ice hockey before. But in American boarding schools, they do divide the sport teams into different levels. So like thirds, junior varsity, and varsity. So they have tryouts, and they will put you in a team that according to your ability. So they really want students to be engaged, and they believe that it's like through this like team practice and training and all that, this will allow the students to create a much more like cooperation ability and establish a stronger friendship or a stronger bonding with their friends. And also music. Some of the schools, they're huge in music. So such as Hotchkiss, they do each year, they do pick students with like musically talented students, I would say, piano, violin, or cello. Yes, so they are very big on music, and some of them, they do actually perform in like New York and other states as well. So it's a really good opportunity for music students as well. I know some of the parents, they thought that, oh, I don't want to send my kid to like a music school, but US boarding school actually offer really good facilities, teachers there for the music program as well. Right, so I just want to quickly go over this. So the key features of US boarding school, what I really want to mention is that obviously usually they are trimester, they're on trimester, and there are major holidays as well. So nowadays they usually close during the longer breaks or even shorter breaks. Let's say Thanksgiving is only usually 1 week towards the end of November, but schools will be closed. And then for Christmas break, spring break, and summer break, they will be closed as well. But some of the schools during spring break, they do offer traveling programs for students as well. So for example, the Lawrenceville School, they do offer like something called the Harkness Travel Program or something. So they do have teachers from the school to bring the students to different places, even for like a community service trip or like for other for other learning purposes. So some of the schools, they do offer different sort of activities during spring break as well. So athletics, mandatory, as I said, every day after school, basically you have to do some sort of sport for boarding schools. And they do divide the athletics the teams into different levels as well, to encourage everyone to join the team. Just want to quickly go through this as well. So this is like a sample athletic options, because a lot of the parents, especially when they are come to foundation and ask, hey, I want to plan ahead, and what kind of activities should my kid pick up, right? Like, because like some of the students, they're not like a fan of sport, but usually during the planning process, we'll assess the kid, and also we'll see what kind of sports would be a great fit. For example, especially for girls, they might not really enjoy like soccer or basketball, those kind of sports that have a lot of physical contact. So depends on schools, we might recommend, let's say, squash or like swimming or even golf. So it's good to have on your profile, because they really want the students to during the application or the admission committee meetings, they really want to see students who are actually prepared. You don't have to be super good at squash or good at a particular sport, but that would be a plus if you're good at a certain kind of sport. But if they see on your profile you have been doing like different kind of sports consistently, then this will be a plus for the application process as well. So this is usually something that we will discuss with parents if the parents came to us for consultation, like let's say 1 to 2 years in advance. Right. So this is like a typical day in like a US boarding school. So as I said, is really structured. It's actually really good for students who kind of lack discipline, I would say, because there will always be teachers around, especially for study hall. So some of the schools, they actually collect the students' phones during study halls, and also they will have to leave their doors open, or they do have the opportunity to go to the library to study different sort of things. And for lights out as well, usually for lower grades, they do have like earlier lights out time, and then Wi-Fi got cut off. But when you go to 11th or 12th grade, they do understand you have like a more heavy workload. So they allow you to sleep slightly later, and they allow you to have Wi-Fi overnight as well. But it depends on school as well. So this is like a general like overview of what it's like in a boarding school. It's like a typical day. All right. So the next one will be the application process. So we always said the application process, there are 8 elements for the US private school application process. So we'll start from the bottom of the pyramid. So we call the denial factor. So why would the GPA and like the standardized testing be a denial factor? Because some of the schools that do receive a lot of applications. So for example, like the top 10 schools, they receive over 1,000 applications. So it's actually impossible for them to read through every single application. So that's why during the committee meeting, what they usually do is they look at the GPA and your standardized testing scores. And obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit about it later, which is the interview. So they do it if you don't have like a really decent GPA, or like your standardized test score doesn't really meet the minimum requirement, then you will be out for the very, very first round. So for the school GPA, what the schools are looking for is the past 2-year transcript and also the current year academic grades. So a lot of the students, actually a lot of the parents, they came and asked me, oh, my students just transferred to this school and his grades don't look very good. So what we usually recommend is try the best that you can, show them that you are improving at school, especially if the student is currently studying in an international school. There will be teachers' comments on the school reports as well. So that will count. So no longer, for example, if there are effort grades, make sure students try their best to submit their work on time and also engage in class. The American boarding schools, they do look at effort grades as well. Don't just say, oh, I scored 100% in my exam, but I just don't like to participate in class discussion. Then you might get a really low effort grade on your report. Then that might be something too, because it's too competitive. So the schools are actually pretty picky in terms of like, oh, your school GPA and your effort grade as well. So yeah. So even though you don't have like a all straight A, make sure your transcripts or like the grades on your reports, they are actually improving. And the next one will be the standardized test scores. So TOEFL will be mandatory for a lot of students who like for international students. But it really depends on the education background of the student as well, because some of the schools, they allow students to waive TOEFL if they have been studying in an English-speaking school, let's say in an international school, for at least 2 years. Some maybe 3, but it depends. You can waive it. And then for SSAT is another standardized test score, which Mr. Tushar is probably going to talk a little bit more about it later on, what they're looking for and how we're going to prepare for that. But SSAT, a lot of the schools, they said it's optional after COVID, because they do feel that SSATs, some of the students, they might like prep too much. They don't feel that. And also the schools actually want to focus a little bit more on the personality and also the profile of the students instead of just looking blindly at their test scores. But this is still something, because even though I said a lot of the schools, they're moving towards SSAT optional, but to be honest, because it's too competitive, even though like the students, they are applying to schools that that are SSAT optional, they still submit an SSAT score. So this is something that we need to watch out when we're applying or when we're preparing for the US boarding school application. And then the next thing, I would say this is actually very, very important as well. The in-school extracurricular activities and the outside of school extracurricular activities. So why is this? Because as you can see, when we move up towards the top of the pyramid, there will be essays and interview as well. Without all the ECAs, like no matter it's at school or outside of school, we won't be able to put like any of your stories or like any of the students' experiences in the essays or in your interview. So this is something I would say Foundation is actually pretty good at helping students to plan out their activities in terms of like picking CCAs at school. And also like we look at students' profile and to see, oh, which one is lacking or which one we are actually spending too much time on. We may need to, or this might not be helpful for the US application process. Obviously, we do find a balance. When we are doing the planning process, I really enjoy talking to the students and the families as well. Make sure the activities that we recommend, at least the students are actually enjoying doing it. I don't want to recommend things that is just like doing for the application. That's not the point, right? So the most important, because I mean, the interviewers are smart enough. They're able to identify like, oh, this activity, is this your genuine passion or is this like you're just doing it for the application purpose? So this is something that we need to be mindful of. And I would say one advice to all the parents, don't follow what the others, like what other parents do, because I get a lot of like questions from all the parents like, oh, I have a friend and he's doing whatever activity. Should I just follow them? Oh, like I was like, oh, every student is really different. So what we really need to do is like talk to the student and make sure we pick the activity that would highlight the personality, because during the application process, the interview is like the most important thing of I would say is the deciding factor of the entire like application process. Right. So I would say the ECAs, the essays, and interview, they actually come in a bundle. I can't separate it. Without the ECAs, I don't have experiences. And especially for summer programs as well. I know a lot of parents, they might be asking about, oh, what should I do during summer? So this is something that will need a lot of planning as well, because like different types of summer programs, US or even other countries, like the summer programs that will be important during the application process as well. Is a matter of like the experience that match with the students' personality or what we said as the positioning. And then the next one, next element would be the parent essay and the teacher recommendation as well. So apart from like the students, they will have to write their own essays, the parent will have to write their essays as well. But make sure, I'm not gonna go into like depth today, but make sure we don't always brag about our kids and in a parent essay or in a parent interview. That's very important. And teacher recommendation is actually very, very, very important as well, because obviously, students can be super good in an interview and all that, but the teacher, I have seen like students with like perfect GPA, but the teacher recommendation, like some of the schools, they might told us that, oh, there's something like he's not behaving in class, he likes to talk to his friends in class, then that will actually be something that will affect the application process. As again, because it's too selective, the schools are actually finding things that they can pick on you. They just don't want to accept you. So that's why I always said GPA is important, but also maintain a good relationship with your teachers at school. So what we really need for teacher recommendation is at least 3 recommendations. One is the advisor or the class teacher recommendation, math teacher recommendation, and then the English teacher recommendations as well. These are the 3 mandatory teacher recommendations. And some of the schools, they do require like extra recommendations too. So it really depends on case by case. Some of them we will suggest to find like an extracurricular teacher to supplement, or we can say, oh, find a, like, let's say if a student is super good at STEM, then maybe find a like a biology teacher, things like that. So it really is a strategy as well. We can't submit as many teacher recommendations as we want, because first of all, the admission committee won't have time to read all of them. So we would say usually around 5 to 6 max in total. So yeah, some of the parents like, oh, can I submit like 10 recommendations? I'm like, no, it will actually hurt the application. It's like if your student is good enough, why would you need so many teacher recommendations? So yeah, the teacher's choice is very important as well. And then obviously for the essays and for the interviews, as well. So this is something that foundation helps a lot of the families to do. We're I would say we're pretty skilled at digging out the student stories. We talk to families, we talk to students, finding out, we would say, the key stories and the positioning. Every student is different. Like one may be like artistic student, one might be like a student who enjoys doing a lot of community service. So this actually will affect the planning process and also the school selection process as well, and then the essay content and the interview. So here at Foundation, we have different phases in terms of the interview. We make sure like the students sound really genuine in an interview, and we don't ask them to memorize any of the answers. I know some parents might tell me, oh, I just like write out all the responses and have my kid to memorize all the answers. I mean, we don't recommend that, because the interviewer, they're actually very smart. If they actually feel that the students are memorizing their answers, they will actually ask you some really, really weird questions to make sure they just want to test your ability to like express your thoughts. All right. Yeah, so this are the basic, like the 8 elements of like a US boarding school. And obviously for the planning process, we usually recommend around like 1 to 2 year in advance for the preparation process as well, mostly because of the activities that we will need to help the students to build, like the profile building, I would say, because what the schools are looking for is consistency. We can't just say, oh, I participate in this like campaign or like in this community service for like 2 months. That's it, right? So what they are looking for is like a matter of consistency. And usually, as you can see from this timeline, we do like profile analysis from the beginning, and then we do student positioning, and obviously we do recommend when's a good time to start like test prep, and then we do school selection, interview training, essay coaching, and all that, right? And this is like a brief overview. I can go on and on about this, but for this, one of my youngest student, he is actually in 4th grade, so the mom actually thinks like of very like think a few years ahead of time. So usually most of our students, they either come in grade 6 or in grade 7 for the planning process. So this is just an overview for everyone's reference. But here at Foundation, we're tailor-made the plan for every single student. But we do make sure if they need some sort of like language help, we make sure we strengthen their language at the beginning, because as I said, interview is very, very important. Especially the oral English part is important as well. And also we during the training process, the planning process will also train the students up for soft skills training, such as like time management and independence. We do assign different tasks to students, because we want them to be prepared when they enter into a US boarding school. It's not purely for the application process, but we want to make sure they do good or they survive in the boarding school. That's very, very important, because a lot of the parents, they might help the students to prepare, oh, you have to do this and that, and have a very packed schedule. But when the students went to a boarding school, they just don't know how to handle their schedule by themselves. So this is something here at Foundation, we help the students to build on their soft skills as well. And then obviously we do summer planning, when's a good time for the students and the families to visit schools, what type of summer programs is actually suitable for the students as well. And then obviously for the last year, we do the application. So yeah, that's it for my end. So I guess I would pass that to Mr. Tushar, so he can share a little bit more about like the SSAT prep and all that.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Iris. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Tushar. I work at Prep Zone Academy. We help candidates with the SSAT preparation. So why don't I quickly share my screen, and I'll run you through the test structures. Oops. There you go. Can everyone see this? Yeah? All right. Yeah. So as far as the entire application process is concerned, as Iris mentioned, the SSAT is an integral component. It sort of supplements your academic performance. And essentially, it's used to gauge your English or verbal reasoning skills as well as quantitative reasoning skills. It is an important factor when assessing one candidate against another who may not necessarily have similar academic backgrounds, right? So comparing one international candidate, let's say with A levels or that curriculum against someone studying an IB curriculum, it may not necessarily be that straightforward. And that's where your standardized test sort of comes in, right? So let's jump into the basic details about the test itself. As far as doing the test in Singapore is concerned, it's only a computer-based test. These are available for upper and middle levels, and you have to register through the Prometric website. What exactly are these different levels? Well, upper level is essentially for students currently in grades 8 to 11 who are essentially applying for grades 9 through 12. Middle levels would essentially be students currently in grades 5 to 7, applying to 6th through 8th. And then the elementary level is for students currently in grades 3 and 4, right? So different structures. And we do understand the fact that students from different grades are doing or sitting for the same test, right? So SSAT does account for that. So your percentiles are actually provided with respect to students from your age group, right? It's not just your score that's important. It's also how you have performed when compared with other students in a similar position, right? The testing actually is available practically throughout the year. The deadline is usually about 3 to 4 weeks prior to the test date itself. So all you have to do is go to the Prometric website, select SSAT for the test centers near you, and you'll be able to see a range of test dates, right? So typically getting a seat based on our experience has not really been an issue, right? Now, there is no limit as such in terms of how many times you can sit for the test itself. Obviously, it's not a fun experience. Over 3 hours, it's not exactly a walk in the park. So I wouldn't necessarily advise doing the test, let's say more than 2 times or so. It can get rather tiring. Most of the candidates, what they generally do is they start preparing and book in the test date only when their practice test performance or practice test results are getting close to their target score, right? That's definitely an integral part of the entire preparation timeline. The test fee, 320 USD for each attempt. Now, the most crucial aspect is your performance only in that specific admission or testing cycle will be released to the university. So someone in grade 8 right now, only planning to apply 2 years down the road, can sit for the test in grades 8 and 9 as well, but those would not be released to the universities. All right, so just keep that part in mind. Yeah, you can select essentially the scores that you'll be sending to the schools. Typically Monday through Sunday, the testing dates are practically any and every day of the week. What the organization does is that it sends out the results to the schools the following week. So typically around the mid of the following week, and you'll receive the results a day after the schools have received the results, right? So that's generally the timeline. Now, what exactly is tested on the SSAT? Well, it's mainly math and English, but it's broken down into these main areas. You've got the essay section, which is not graded, but they still want to know your writing ability, right? So the essay will be made visible to the schools. Quantitative reasoning, which is essentially math that you have studied practically up to that point in school. So things like integers, word problems, geometry, percentages, ratios, probability, all of these things will be tested, right? Reading, as it says, essentially passage-based questions. So comprehension could be 300 to 500 long passages. Typical questions like, what's the main idea of the passage? What can strengthen the argument? And so on and so forth. Verbal, this essentially consists of vocabulary and analyzing analogies, right? Comparing things. Each of these three areas, quant, reading, and verbal, will be scored on a scale from 500 to 800 in increments of 10. So the scores that you can get are 750, 760, obviously starting from 500, 510, 520, all the way up to 8. So what exactly is a good score definitely varies from one school to another. But generally speaking, as an international applicant, we advise students to target something in excess of 2200. I think just in the last testing cycle, we had at least 3 or 4 students who scored well above 2300. So it's more about getting started early, making sure that you build a strong foundation, make sure you learn all the concepts, build on your vocabulary, focus on speed reading, because that's usually a major area of concern for a lot of the students. And then obviously practicing SSAT specific questions, and lastly, doing so in a time efficient manner, along with full length practice tests, right? The test duration is just over 3 hours. For math section, no calculators allowed. Estimation is going to be important. Mental math is going to be important. And different from most of the other tests that students might have done so far, you do get penalized for answering a question incorrectly. So if you're not sure, if you're not able to eliminate answers, if you're not able to narrow it down to, let's say, 2 choices, you're still better off leaving the question unanswered, because if you answer it incorrectly, you lose points. So yeah, we actually help students practice this skill in terms of at what stage should you guess and at what point in time should you not answer, leave the question blank, and move on. Right, that's going to be extremely important. So quickly running through the order in which you'll see the test sections. So you'll start off with the essay. There will be 2 prompts. You can choose which one to respond to. It's 25 minutes in duration, following which you'll have a 10-minute quick break. Then you'll have the math section, 25 questions in 30 minutes, so just over a minute per question, which you can see is definitely much less than the timing that you are allocated when you're at school. So it's more about working on time management skills than what you do otherwise. Comprehension is even more strenuous, 40 questions in 40 minutes. So speed reading becomes extremely crucial. Then another 10-minute break, followed by a couple of sections for verbal, which would be your synonyms and analogies, essentially vocab-based, 60 questions in 30 minutes, just about 30 seconds per question. And then again, yet another math section, also 25 questions in 30 minutes. And then there is an experimental section, which is essentially not scored, but it's used to develop or curate more and more questions for future. Right? Now, I know it is quite late, so in the interest of time, I won't really go through the questions, but I'll show you exactly what the questions would look like. And I'll quickly run down how we help candidates, and then we take questions, right? Essay, as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 prompts. One prompt is analytical based, where you give your own opinion on a given topic. And the other is essentially a story that you could write. There are 2 main things that they're essentially analyzing: the content and the style of English, or the quality of grammar, vocabulary that you're using, right? So to give you 2 examples, one prompt could be, if you could give everyone in the world anything, what would it be and why? And this is like an opinion piece. And then the other example for story, where it's just like the first line. They had first seen one another the day before, right? So in the former, it's more about how relevant your examples are to elaborate on your opinion, right? How structured is your argument? Are you using examples from current events, how up to date you are. So this is where being aware what's going on in the world, also looking at historical context, being aware of very unique, specific examples, I think that definitely helps. In the latter, again, it's about creativity. How creative can you get with the story, all right? The next one that we'll look at is math. Typical math question. If x and y are, if the sum x and x plus y is divisible by 9, which of the following expressions must also be divisible by 9? So this is where I've seen a few students get sort of caught up. There are questions where it's must be scenario, and there are other questions where it's a could be scenario. So it's extremely important for you to read the question in detail. To save time, make sure you read the question exactly once. Whatever information is provided, try to translate that either into an equation, an algebraic expression, pictorial representation. When you do that over and over again, I think you understand that you're able to save a lot more time by reading the question exactly once and having that confidence that, yes, I did extract all the information that was relevant, right? This is what a typical reading comprehension prompt would look like. So you've got your passage. It could be a really, really dry passage about content or a topic that you're not at all interested in. You really have to persevere through it. Unfortunately, that is the harsh reality. So make sure that you don't, get lost and just read the same sentence 5-6 times before you snap back into it. It is important to understand what the typical question types are, right? So what's the main idea of the passage? Which of the following arguments could support the conclusion being drawn by the author? Or which of the following could weaken the argument provided by the author, right? So this is where reading the text and converting that into, or summarizing that into 4 to 5 words or 10 words will help you understand which text or which part of the passage to go back to. This is what the verbal reasoning section would look like. Synonyms. So this is where vocabulary is going to be extremely important. The word jettison is a synonym for which one of these 5? Obviously, if you don't know the meaning of the word, it definitely becomes really tricky to answer this question. So yeah, it's going to be important for you to start building on your vocabulary. And then analogies, valor is to heroes as, so this is a comparison, right? So valor is essentially a trait of someone who is heroic. So which of these 5 answer choices would then be a similar comparison, right? So this is where analogies, understanding what the comparison point is going to be crucial. So that's the test structure in a nutshell. Now, as far as how long it takes to prepare for the test, it varies based on a few different things. Exactly what level you're starting from, what's your target score, how much time and effort are you able to dedicate on a regular basis. So I would say historically that's been somewhere between 3 to 6 months, which is not to say that is always the case. We've definitely seen shorter and longer timelines as well. So typically 3 months to build a strong foundation, making sure that you get the right exposure to the different question types, 2 months of intense practice, along with full-length practice tests, and then a buffer just in case you're not happy with your score and you want to sit for the test again. Right? So the average timeline is between 4 to 6 months. But as I said earlier, there are people who've done the test or sat for the test a lot quicker as well. Our most recent students, there were siblings, I think they prepared for the test in a span of 5 weeks. And one of the siblings got 99th percentile, another one got 93rd percentile. So it is possible, but most of the students we see are generally spending it over a longer period, so they are able to spread their workload without compromising what's going on in school, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say everyone's taking 10 months. This is the maximum time frame that we've seen. How we help students with their preparation? Well, we actually customize our classes based on the students' requirements. So we do one-to-one sessions only. We provide the necessary training material. We provide the necessary practice book for the appropriate level as well, whether the student's at the middle level, elementary level, or upper level. You don't have to purchase material. We give you all the resources along with practice tests. The way the one-to-one classes are going to be structured is that you have complete flexibility. You decide when the sessions are conducted, the duration of each session, specifically which areas you want to focus on. So hypothetically, let's say if your math is strong and you want to emphasize on English, let's say 90% of the time, you want 2 classes a week, let's say Tuesday evenings and Saturday afternoons. That sort of customization is what we help out with, right? So if you have any additional questions pertaining to this, I'm sure June will be happy to connect you with us, and we'll be able to share more information. But typically, what the first step for our students is to actually start with a diagnostic test. Whether you're working with us or not, it doesn't matter. It's just a complementary test to help you understand where exactly do you stand right now, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, because then you're able to get a better understanding of how much time and effort would be required to get to a good score. All right. So we can arrange that any day of the week. It'll be a full length test, so over 3 hours. A lot of the students feel a lot of fatigue the very first time they sit for the test. So please be prepared for those of you who are planning to start with that. But yeah, that's it from my side. My name is Tushar. I'll be happy to stick around to answer any questions. Back to you, June and Iris.
Yeah, thank you, Tushar. Yep. That's all for today's presentations and sharings. And now, if parents, you all have any questions, can feel free to just unmute yourself, and you can just speak in the Zoom, or if you prefer to type in the chat box, you can also feel free to do so. But of course, after this, if you prefer like a personal one-to-one consultation sessions, and if you want to ask some like detailed questions, feel free to WhatsApp me. You have the WhatsApp number. You just drop me a message. Sometimes I'm just apologize. I probably will not like reply immediately, but I will check the WhatsApp time to time, and yeah, I will follow up with you. So in future, we will also on and off, I would say frequently, regularly we'll have these sharing sessions as well. It will not be only talking about boarding school, like US boarding schools. Probably we will further down, we can also talk about like even US universities. We can also talk about UK boarding schools. So just stay tuned, and whenever we have topics and we are going to just set for new sharing sessions, I will just WhatsApp everyone and inform everyone about these sharing sessions on and off. Probably will be like a monthly basis. So if there's any other questions, feel free to just unmute yourself, and you can just ask Tushar or Iris directly. And so I guess maybe seems that today not so much questions on your side, but it's okay. Anytime you have new ideas, or you have any other questions you want to ask us, you can feel free to WhatsApp us, and or you have Tushar's number. You can also tell me. I can always link you up with Tushar Prep Zone. So we keep in touch. Thank you for today. Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Take care.